Good morning, afternoon, or good evening, folks. I'm your host and guide, Chris Roberts. I'm going to take you on a tour of the underground to help you prepare for what's really out there. Whether you're on the front lines battling the latest threats or leading the overall defensive strategy within your organization, my focus is to help you uncover the best ways, means, and methods to effectively and efficiently use actual threat intelligence within your company, providing you with more insights and practical ways to identify threats and reduce risks before they become incidents. Ready to dive in?
If anything, I think people need to know who you are. Just take me through your backstory. Who are you? How'd you get into the field? And why the dark web?
The who is an interesting one. I mean, I've been fortunate. I mean, I've been creeping around this industry since it began, when you really think about it. And in some ways, not quite the IT industry. I really don't go back to Second World War times. Family does, but I don't. But I mean, I started messing around with this stuff 1980, when you think about it. I was in boarding school. So I spent almost a year in boarding school, not a complete year in boarding school, but almost a year in boarding school. Boarding school and I did not get on with each other. Something about rules and regulations and. So I started messing around with computers there. I was like 9, 10 years old. And one of the kids in school had got himself a Sinclair, one of the old ZX80s and ZX81s. So a whole 4K of RAM. That was it. That's all you had to play with. And we ended up building a joystick for this thing. We built all sorts of other stuff by just tinkering, by playing around, and by hacking, and by trying to figure out, basically what made it work. Why did it work? What was this thing and how did it work? And then from there, I messed around with them for a little bit longer, but then I took a break because I ended up coming back to family were over in another country. And because boarding school and I didn't agree with each other, I went back and that caused some concern. So they ended up coming back to England. So I went to a good old box standard, normal, what they call comprehensive school in the UK, which is from like 11 to 15. So when in the middle of that, like I was about 12 or 13, I figured out that the computers in the library were of interest and had all sorts of fun stuff on them, and started tinkering and messing around with them. And at home, I got one of the old Atari systems, the home game systems. And I'm a little competitive, is probably a very nice way to put it. And I hated losing the games. So I would load these games up, and we're talking back on, the cartridges, they had cartridges, but I also had a cassette player. I saved up and bought a cassette player. So I'm loading the darn cassette in, waiting for the damn game to load up. And then I'm like, okay, well, again, back to the early days, is what is it? How does it work? What makes it? And I'm reading through all the magazines and other things. End up buying myself a modem coupler. So good old telephones, proper rotary dial, jack it in and off you go. And poor mother's phone bill at the time wasn't that good, unfortunately. So I found out how to actually mess around with good old British Telecom. So I apologize in advance for 40 years ago, 35 years ago, messing around with all their systems. But figured all this out. And then parents, unfortunately, went their separate ways. And I was none too happy with that situation. And my father and I at the time had a pretty fractious relationship. Again, rebellion and all this stuff. He was very military at home, very military at work. And I took one of the parts I took revenge on him leaving was I basically war dialed the entire town I lived in until I figured out where the bank's modem was. And I'd done all the research and everything else on the background, all the forums, and ended up moving money out of his account into an account. Master criminal here, moved it into an account in my name. Woohoo! Yeah, so the police, my father had obviously realized his bank account didn't have anything left in it, got hold of the bank, and the bank was like, well, yes, we see a transaction. Oh, look, a new account. And my father was the one that had me arrested, and the police turned up on the doorstep. My mother was like, Christopher, they're for you. And so this was 14, 15 years old. And so they didn't know what the heck to do with me. I had no clue what the heck to do with me. The bank was like, make it go away. The police were like, pfft. So they ended up confiscating the artillery and a friend's Commodore that I'd been using for doing some of the other work as well. So I owed my friend a Commodore, I think it was a 64, and I ended up buying like a Commodore 128, a period of time later. So yeah, that was the intro. That was literally the start. So we're going back 85, 86 time frame. And then I worked, I started working, I did night shift cooking when I was 15 and 16. And then from there ended up going into this industry for a while as a tech, screwdriver in one hand, floppy disk in the other hand, and going around figuring, we're figuring this out. I mean, we all joke about it nowadays, but back then you really didn't have a huge amount of support. So we were figuring it out on the fly. And then I did a bunch of other jobs, and then went into the military and jumped out of airplanes for a living. Hence the Health for Heroes shirt, which is, one of the British institutions that looks after folks that are coming out, disabled, or need some help. So yeah, did that, jumped out of airplanes for a living, came out of doing that and went back into this industry, got yelled at again, back to the whole attitude of, well, you're not going to listen, so we're just going to show you what the problem is, which is great until you start moving people's money around. And then all of a sudden the rules change. And especially if you move big institutions' money around, apparently when you move it across borders and out of countries, they get all uppity about it, even if you're just proving a point. So we got pretty well yelled at for that one. And that was, I say, moving towards mid-late 90s. So we were starting to get this whole what's going to happen in the year 2000 shenanigans. And I was still based in I was in the UK, but I was being sent to various other places around Europe. And 98 rolls around and we're doing war games with the US. And standard British mentality, we'll show the Yanks a thing or two. And we did. I mean, we went through their systems like a hot knife through butter, and it wasn't pretty. And they weren't too happy because apparently we set all sorts of alarms off at all sorts of interesting places. I mean, we started disabling stuff, messing with stuff. I mean, we were having fun. We were still kids. I mean, still the military mindset. But we were a bunch of tinkerers and hackers who were basically exploring around some very interesting systems that apparently we shouldn't have been able to explore around. So the United States of America land sent an airplane over and said, I say, you uppity individuals, would you mind coming back with us? Basically it was like, get your asses on the plane and fix the shit. It was probably a slightly more realistic view of it. So the folks I was working with at the time were like, go figure it all out. And I've been over here ever since. Stayed in the industry most of the time, took a break, went down to Bolivia, went climbing, went up to Alaska, went climbing for like 6 months, took a break out of it, got dragged back into it when 2001 came along. And I've been in it ever since, but it's always been one of those ones where I have like my day job, I have my regular, here's the job I have to work at to earn money to pay for things. And then I've always got this side, which is, you can't see everything that's behind me, but we'll have to do a tour of this one day. There's like cabinets here, there's things, there's stuff, and it's always tinkering. And it's always trying to find out what makes something tick. We were taking light bulbs to pieces because in the old days with the older light bulbs, the standard ones, you could actually shine a laser at the light bulb and listen in on the conversation in a room. It's actually kind of a fun little thing to do. Nowadays, you can't do that because the darn things are all, we have Internet of Things and this and that, and like electronics. You can't shine a laser. The stupid thing goes, huh? So you had to find a better way. So we ended up taking all these light bulbs to pieces and figured out how to turn them into listening devices. And it's just through tinkering. It's through doing fun stuff. And so I've always done that. Then you combine that with that thirst of knowledge and the open, when you think about like layers of a cake. If you just think about the internet as these layers of a cake, you can Google stuff. And this day and age, you can get an amazing amount of stuff on Google. But then you're like, well, what else is there? So then you start digging in. You're like, well, that was Google, but here's, let's just say Library of Congress or, the British Library. It's behind either a paywall or a register wall. So you look at this stuff and you're like, okay, this is even cooler. Then you go like, well, what else is there? Then you start looking at the darker side of the world. And the dark there, the internet, the stuff that's basically hidden behind Tor and Onion. And I think what's interesting to know is it's not all negative stuff there. There is obviously a ton of negative stuff, which we'll get into as we go through this entire series. But there's some amazing resources there. So you start digging into those resources. And then you're like, well, that's kind of cool. But what else is there? And then you start digging into the hidden areas behind all of that stuff, where you literally crack open the door, hand over your passcode, and then you're getting to show, the innermost workings. The analogy that used to be used years ago was the Matrix. I mean, it was, the film's been out 20 plus years. And there was always that analogy of, how deep does the rabbit hole go? And you've got to be very careful with that, because you can very quickly, easily go down certain rabbit holes and end up in a conspiratorial theory where you don't leave the house and you're wearing a blasted, a Nomex suit lined with tin foil all the time. Or you accept risk and you deal with it accordingly. So yeah, it's been kind of a fun journey. And what am I now? I'm in my 50s, early 50s, thankfully, touch wood. But I'm still as enthused as I was years ago. I've just got a few more war wounds to go with it. Now, the place drives me more nuts this day and age, but I still enjoy that digging and finding and checking and seeing and all that kind of good stuff.
So we're going to be digging and finding and tinkering on this series. What, I mean, why is it important for our audience to listen in on this, and who should be listening in on this?
Oh, now that is a good question, isn't it? If you go back, when you got into the car, you had to understand how the darn thing worked for the most part. And even today's day and age, I've brought my daughter up to understand how to change things, understand things, blah, 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 how to actually know what a car actually does. You understand what the heck makes something tick. Now, when you think about the internet and you think about how it is, at the end of the day, it isn't this object that's separated from us. A ridiculously good friend of mine, Ryan Cloutier, says that we are analog humans in a digital world. And he's very, very right. We can understand how a car works because we can see it and we can feel it. But when you start talking about the internet, it's not tactile. It's not tactile very much. We can touch the cameras, we can play with the microphones, we do all these things. But you can't actually see the bits and bytes flowing. You don't know, unfortunately, how much of you is being harvested. You, the individual, or you, the company. Nobody walks up to you, smacks you upside the head and walks off with your wallet. I mean, they do, unfortunately, sometimes. But in the digital world, that can happen so easily, so effective, and you just don't know it's occurred. It's the same thing. We always talk about it when we talk about insider threats, or we talk about how long somebody has been inside a company for. Mean time to discovery, and that number has unfortunately increased as time's gone by, because the adversary has gotten more sophisticated. Well, if you put it in the real world, how quickly would you know that somebody's living in your home? Hopefully pretty quickly. I mean, I got 3 Great Danes, of which they'll occasionally pop up on screen here once in a while. Those Great Danes would tell me very, very quickly who's in my house. I would know by rattling the door, looking at the windows, the cameras, all these other things would help me understand that somebody's creeping around the house. In the digital world, we don't have that. We haven't got that sorted out properly. It's not as effective as it should be. And unfortunately, we don't have that awareness. So when you look at who should listen in, I'd almost argue everybody. I hope, and I would hope that my mother will listen in on these. I'll probably get the telephone call in, Christopher. But at the same time, I want my mother to understand that the computer or the iPad or the device that she has some amazing capabilities. But it should also come with some warning signs, which unfortunately they don't. So when you use certain programs, or when you use certain software, when you interact with certain services and systems, you should at least understand what you are handing over. And unfortunately, most people don't. So when you think about it, and it doesn't say don't do it, it's not saying don't use it, because that'll never happen. It's at least go in with your eyes wide open. So I think that's one side of it, which is like, who should listen? Let me look at the whys. Now, this is where the fun turns up. I'm kind of looking forward to this because, Danny, as you and I have been working on this now for a while, we've got some really cool pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. We're not focusing just on one thing. We're going to take the jigsaw puzzle, which is really intelligence and data, and go, hey, how would leadership do something with it? How would somebody who's frontline do something with it? How would an analyst deal with it? How do we deal with it? How do we find it? What is it? You start breaking all of this down, and all of a sudden that jigsaw puzzle, that is that nebulous darknet, starts getting a bit of a light shone on it. You start to see, hey, this is why we look at it. This is why this is useful. Now, and we've used this analogy a couple of times as we've talked behind the scenes, we all talk about a perimeter, in security, everybody's like, well, secure the perimeter. In housing, in the real world, I want to secure my walls. Whereas unfortunately in the digital world, that perimeter doesn't exist. It's gone. Bye-bye. Have a nice day. Enjoy. Your data's everywhere. But just sitting there still thinking you have a perimeter is unfortunately not a good position to be in. Much better to have something that tells you what's over the horizon, what's coming at you. Is it trebuchet? Well, I kind of care about it. Maybe. Is it, somebody running along with a club? Probably me, the Neanderthal, let's face it. Or is somebody basically sitting way over the hillside with an Exocet missile pointed at you, at which point I kind of want to know about it. So it's helping the various people understand why these bits of the jigsaw are useful, who they're useful to in an organization. Is it a leadership risk decision? Is it a tactical decision about a human or a piece of technology? Is it an awareness discussion to have with the technical teams, the development teams, the system teams, the standard users to go, hey, guess what? Our leadership is a bit vocal and we're out on the internet a lot. You're all at risk. Here's how to help you understand the types of risks that you're facing. Anything. It's so useful for anybody. Just depends upon which tool you want to use.
And so we're going to be bringing on, like, who's our audience that we're going to be bringing on to explore these issues and to tinker around on the dark web?
Yeah, I think that's going to be fun because we're going to have senior leadership. I'm looking forward to bringing on some really, really good friends to talk about what they're doing with intelligence, to talk about what they're doing inside their organizations, where their backgrounds come from with threat intelligence, how are they using this threat intelligence, as well as actually, I'm really looking forward to digging into the knowledge and the experience of cybersecurity brilliance. Quite honestly, I'm the kid in the toy store. I'm kind of having some fun with this because I get to go to the analyst and go, hey, could I borrow one of you for half an hour's worth of conversation? What the heck do you do? And by the way, how the darn heck beyond do you speak Russian and this? And how the smurf do you change all of these conversations from 60, 70, 80 different languages into something I can understand? And so that's going to be a fantastic conversation. Then we're going to have conversations with some of the other folks inside. They're going, hey, we know tactics change. We know years ago, we all sat there with smoke signals, semaphores, and carrier pigeons. Now we sit on encrypted channels and IRC and ICQ and I2P and all these other acronyms that we've created for the sheer giggles of keeping everybody excluded. By the way, we're going to talk about acronyms as well. But we're going to have people help us understand how tactics work and what tactics and how we modify and how we advance them because they continually change. I think this is another one of the things with security. Everybody comes in and goes, I will solve your problems. Actually, no, you're not. This is a journey. This isn't going to end. So the more you understand the theater that you're operating, the more you understand the situations, you have that situational awareness, the better the chance you have of actually staying on this path of this journey and not getting sideswiped by somebody who's basically wanting to take it all from you.
Is it about catching up or being ahead of the adversary?
Ooh, now that is a loaded question, isn't it? My gosh. I think, famous last words, I honestly think it's about understanding. The best that we can do is look at the landscape and go, what's happened? And we can go, what's happened? Then we can go, theoretically, what's likely to happen? And we can do that with information. It's predictive. You start looking at algorithms as humans. If you look at the credit card industry, perfect example, credit card industry has had predictive algorithms for around 20, 30 years. One very well-known credit card company is very, very good at saying, well, we know you're there because we predicted you take an airline flight. So if we can get to a point with all the information and all the darker side of the stuff that we pull out, and we can start correlating that and understanding actors, threat actors, individuals, teams, groups, adversaries, reasons why, because not everybody is waving a flag and going, I'm going to fight you because of my country. Oh, heck no. I might just not like the look of your leadership because the person that's in charge is an absolute womble who's all over the internet and I just don't like him. Or You might be operating in a country that I really don't want you operating in. You might be digging up the side of a mountain to provide the minerals and stuff that goes into my electronics, and I don't like you because of that. Whatever my reasons, the better we understand those, the better chance we have of hopefully going from, hey, we react, to something where we can get more predictive. I don't think we'll ever get ahead, but what I want to be able to do is at least go, hey, from a situational awareness, these are the 3 or 4 potential scenarios. Here are the risks. Here's the awareness. Here's the understanding. Here's what you can do from a tactics procedure standpoint to better protect yourself.
There are a lot of security podcasts out there. How is this one particularly different or complementary to others out there?
So I think this one's going to be complementary in some ways. I think because we have such a diverse schedule, for a better way of putting it. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, again, Danny, you've done an amazing job. I'm looking at the spreadsheet for the next basically 12 months. And there's a ton of it filled in. For everybody that's listening into this, it's crazy. It's amazing the amount that's gone into this. And I think what I love about it as you know, I think what did Miera call me? The brand ambassador. I get to rifle through all of this fun stuff and go, hey, let's have a conversation about this, this, and this. It's really, really cool. So for me, it's complementary in some ways. I also think there isn't a very good, consistent message when it comes to using stuff that's basically hidden on the darker side of the internet, when it comes to talking about threat intelligence. And we're talking actual threat intelligence. We're not talking some of the crazy stuff that people market. Get into that one episode, I'm sure, and that'll be bun fights at dawn with a couple of other organizations out there. But for me, I think it'll be fun because what we do is we'll take a situation, we can apply a tactical discussion to it. We can apply an educational discussion. Again, I want my mother to look at this and go, I understand what's going on. I also want to put a leadership twist on this and go, hey, how can you use this effectively? And then let's face it, we have an open mic session as well, which is, you know, the crazy Dr. Dark Web stuff. That I'm totally looking forward to. There's a part of me that's geeking out about it, but there's also a part of me that doesn't want the ego to walk through the door, 5 minutes before I do. So I'm having to balance that very, very carefully. And a very good friend of mine has promised if my ego starts getting ahead of me, he's already got one of the shotguns loaded up with wax loads. So I have that as my guiding principles for maintaining a level head, shall we say. So no, I think it'll be fun. It's I think the other part of it is as well is I've got to give Cyber6 some credit here on this one. And I'm going to give the credit for a couple of reasons. There are other podcasts that are put out by respective organizations and companies, but they're so heavily branded. They're so heavily, I saw one, and it wasn't a podcast, it was a spreadsheet. It was like how to fix the internet spreadsheet given by one of the companies. It was like, well, this is the problem and this is how we fix it. And this is how we fix it. I'm like, no, you can't be all things to all people. You can't fix everything. So I think what I love about this is Cyber6 said, hey, we're going to put this out. We're doing this for the good of the community. We're doing it for the good of the people. If we get something out of it, fantastic. It's kind of cool. Yeah, everybody's got to put food on the table, but at the end of the day, we're doing it because everybody's got to understand this is where the future's going.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. And, you had mentioned mission before money. I'm a strong believer in that. And so this is all good. We have a lot coming up, a lot coming down the pike, a lot of topics, practical, pragmatic information, great people in the pipeline that will join us. So when are we getting, we're doing this weekly, right? What is the cadence here?
Yeah, this is crazy. It's weekly. It's going to be fun. I'm actually looking forward to it. I mean, it's again, I'm fortunate. I've got to give you and the team a ton of credit. I get the easy job. Let's be honest. I get to kind of show up, wave my hands around a whole bunch, have a little bit of fun, put some stuff into here, and then I get to sit back and put my feet up and have a cup of tea, which is actually rather civilized and nice. Or this time of night, because again, I think from the viewership standpoint, the intro says it all, which is like it's good morning, afternoon, and evening. Because for those of you listening, we are literally not far. What are we, 9 hours? 9 hours difference? Yeah, 9 hours difference apart. So you can do your math and figure out all that shenanigans. But we're about a third of the way across the planet from each other. And I think that's the other fun part about it as well. This I don't want this to be like a fully centric to one part of the geography or other. I'm looking forward to digging into, if we go to the Indian continent, how are they using intelligence as they're building out? How the heck is Australia doing anything? I mean, a bunch of bloody kangaroos and freaking koalas. I mean, and New Zealand to me, everybody goes, where are all the breaches coming from? And I'm like, oh, it's New Zealand. New Zealand's got all the attackers and adversaries. I mean, that country is amazing. I think it's that hidden gem somewhere in the middle of New Zealand. There's this entire nest of basically me's, and it's only because I want to get my ass over there one day and I should go hang out. But yeah, I figure New Zealand will emerge as the new cyber power one day, just for the heck of it.
I love it. I love it. So we're what are we on? Major streamers, right? We're going to be on major streamers on the Cyber6Skill website. Where can we find Dr. Dark Web?
Hopefully everywhere. I mean, I look forward to putting this out. I'm going to be putting the episodes and stuff out on LinkedIn. And to your point, the major streamers, we should have it on all the major streamers. So if you're sitting there with your Apple device or your Android device or your, Crackberry device or any other device, you should be able to get hold of us no matter what. Yeah, but it's going to go up on LinkedIn, it'll go up on Twitter. To your point, Danny, it's going to be up on the Cyber6Skill podcast part of the site. If I can, I'll probably chuck it up on the Hillbilly Hit Squad website as well. So we'll have some fun with it. I'm looking forward to putting this out everywhere.
And what do you want to sign off with? What do you want to tell the audience that's important to you? Anything?
I think it's, for me, and I think this is why I like doing this, is we're going to have the opportunity to get people to ask questions. And I think what we're also going to do is help people understand what's going on in a probably slightly sarcastic, slightly civilized-ish, English, Scottish kind of blunt way, but doing it in such a manner that everybody should be able to understand it. There's no pretenses here. Exactly to what you said. It's a mission before money discussion. How can we help you? How can we help you understand? How can we help you just ask one more question? That to me is the biggest thing. This is why we have a Q&A session set up, every couple of weeks, deliberately for that. So to me, it's like, come along, hang out, bring your questions, and let's go explore. Let's go see what is hiding under the covers.
All right. See you soon.
See you soon.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Dr. Dark Web. This show is brought to you by Cyber6Skill, the threat intelligence company. If you would like to learn more, please feel free to follow or subscribe to Dr. Dark Web on your favorite podcast streamer. Or, as an alternative, you can always find us online at cybersecurity.com/podcast. You'll find all the latest episodes, goodies, nuggets of information, background, and probably some stickers or two. See you in the dark.